In the end, a disloyal wife left that man's life, and then he found a loving one. The man tried to kiss his wife's shoulder. The wife said, "Move away." The man said, "I just want a little love." The wife replied, "I'm not in the mood." The man said, "You always say that." The wife said, "Should I always be ready for you?" The man said, "Don't misunderstand me. I'm just trying to cheer you up." The wife said, "Move. Don't bother me." The man said, "You're my wife, and I need you. Are you tired of me?" The wife said, "It's not that. I'm just in a bad mood." The man asked, "Where are you going?" The wife replied, "To my friend's house." The man said, "Should I drop you there?" The wife said, "No, I'll go myself." She left the house. The maid who was standing outside the room had heard everything. The man came out and said, "Did you hear anything?" The maid said, "No, sir." The man said, "I'm sorry for what you heard." The maid replied, "It's a couple's matter." The man said, "It's strange. It never used to be like this. My wife used to give me time. Can I help you with something?" The maid said, "Yes, this bottle isn't opening." The man opened the bottle and asked, "Did something like this happen between you and your boyfriend?" The maid said, "I don't have a boyfriend, but if I did, this wouldn't happen. Because I believe if two people are together, they should understand each other instead of ignoring one another." The maid left. A few minutes later, the wife was sitting in a cafe. Her boyfriend came and sat in front of her. The wife said, "Why did you call me here?" The boyfriend said, "So we can see each other. Don't you like that?" The wife said, "No." The boyfriend said, "You're lying. Why are you here then?" The wife said, "I just came to tell you that meeting like this is wrong. I'm married." The boyfriend said, "That means you don't love me anymore?" The wife said, "I've made my life now. There's no point talking about this." The boyfriend said, "All those messages show we still want to see each other, and now you're saying you don't want to meet?" The wife said, "It's not like that." The boyfriend said, "Sometimes I think I should never have gone on that trip." The wife said, "If you hadn't, you would have been my husband now. But you chose to leave and didn't even say goodbye." The boyfriend said, "I did it for a better future, and I succeeded. Now I've come back for you." The wife said, "But I don't belong to you anymore." The boyfriend said, "Wait, I want to meet you one last time so you'll believe I still love you." The wife said, "Maybe we'll meet again, but remember, it's wrong." She stood up and left. The next morning, the man came to his wife and said, "Darling, you look so beautiful today." The wife said, "I have to go jogging." The husband said, "Wait, I still have an hour before work. I thought we could spend some time together, and then you can take another shower." The wife said, "To get rid of this, I have to leave now." She left. The man called out, "My shirt isn't ironed." The wife said, "Tell the maid, that's what she's here for." The man went to the maid's room. The maid was working on a computer assignment. The maid said, "Yes, sir. What do you need?" The man said, "Can you iron my shirt?" The maid said, "Of course." She left the room and began ironing. The man came in and said, "Thank you. I should have learned this earlier." The maid said, "If you want, I can teach you right now." She held his hand and showed him how to remove wrinkles. The man said, "I'll do it myself now." After ironing, he said, "What were you doing in your room?" The maid said, "I was studying a university subject." The man said, "You're in university?" The maid said, "Yes." The man said, "You never told me." The maid said, "Because you never asked." The man said, "What are you studying?" The maid said, "Law. I have an important exam coming up." The man said, "I can help you. I'm a lawyer." The maid said, "Thank you, but I don't want your wife to misunderstand." The man said, "Can we study at the university?" The maid said, "No. Rumors will spread and reach your wife's ears." The man said, "We can study in the park. It's a public place." The maid said, "Thank you, sir." The man said, "You helped me. Now I'll help you. I'll wait for you at 2 p.m. in front of the church." The maid said, "Okay, sir." A while later, the wife was jogging when a car stopped beside her. Her boyfriend was inside. He said, "What are you doing here?" The wife said, "Just exercising, going home now." He said, "Get in. I'll drop you." She said, "No, I can go myself." He said, "You're tired. Let me drop you." She got in. He said, "I knew we'd meet again. Can we talk?" She said, "Just drop me home." He said, "I never wanted to leave you. I always thought about you." She said, "There's no point in saying this now." He said, "I know you still love me. I can see it in your eyes." She said, "But I'm married." He said, "If you love me, why did you marry him?" She said, "You left suddenly. I married him to forget you." He said, "Then get a divorce." She said, "I can't hurt my husband." He said, "You're hurting him more by cheating." She got out of the car and said, "I don't want to see you again. I don't want to ruin my life." He said, "Think about my suggestion, and whatever your decision, call me." A few minutes later, the maid said, "Madam, I need to go to the university." The wife said, "Of course, go." The maid left. Just then, the wife's phone rang. It was her husband. He said he'd be late because he was teaching a student. The wife said, "Don't worry, I'll wait for you." After hanging up, she called her boyfriend and said, "I'm home alone. Come quickly. I need to talk to you." A few minutes later, the maid met the man in the park and said, "I need to study about law and its characteristics." The man said, "Well, sure, you're a beautiful woman. Your boyfriend must be lucky." The maid said, "I told you I don't have a boyfriend." The man said, "Sorry, I forgot." The maid said, "And remember, you're a married man." The man said, "Yes, but to a woman who doesn't love me anymore." The maid said, "Don't say that. You're a good man. You'll find the right woman one day." The man said, "You're a good woman who teaches me things. I'm sure you'll find the right man too." The maid said, "Let's start studying." The man said, "Yes, we'll study law and its functions." Meanwhile, the boyfriend came to the wife's house. The wife said, "How do I tell my husband?" The boyfriend said, "Be honest. Don't ruin his life." The wife said, "Let's run away." The boyfriend said, "No, face him." The wife kissed him. On the other side, the man said to the maid, "I can teach you quickly. Tell me, what's the purpose of a lawyer?" The maid said, "I don't know." The man said, "Think about it." The maid laughed and said, "A lawyer's purpose is for his wife to serve him divorce papers and for him to file a response." The man laughed. "Good joke." spoke. He said, "It's about to rain. Let's go to the church." They sat on the church steps. A young man came and said, "Wow, what a beautiful scene." The maid said, "What are you doing here?" The young man said, "Why don't you reply to my messages?" The maid said, "Because we don't have any relationship." He came closer and said, "I'll decide that." The man said, "Don't come near her. She's with me." The young man said, "You better let her go or I'll teach you a lesson." The man said, "You're talking to a good lawyer right now." The young man said, "Sorry, I didn't know." The man said, "Then learn your lesson." He punched the young man, who ran away. The maid said, "Thank you for helping me." The man said, "Now this lawyer will protect you. Let's go home and study." They left together. Meanwhile, the wife and her boyfriend were in bed. The boyfriend said, "Your husband doesn't deserve a woman who doesn't love him." The wife said, "Go now. I'll tell him when he comes." She was about to kiss him when the man and the maid arrived. The wife said, "I can explain everything." The man said, "Everything is clear. There's no need to explain." The wife said, "I didn't want you to find out this way." The man said, "I already had my doubts." He went inside with the maid. A few hours later, the wife brought divorce papers. The man signed them. The wife said, "I didn't want it to end like this." The man said, "Don't worry, it was bound to happen. Go to the man you love." The wife said, "You'll find the right woman too." The man said, "Yes, I will." They exchanged rings and the wife left. The maid came in and said, "Are you okay?" The man said, "Yes, now I have plenty of time to teach you more about law." The maid said, "And I'll teach you how to iron shirts." She hugged him. A few days later, the man gave her a bouquet and said, "Congratulations, lawyer." The maid said, "It all happened because of your love." The man said, "No, it's because of you. You gave me a chance to love again." He hugged her, and together they walked toward a new beginning.